everyone get on your feet and welcome Matthew Likens.
Good evening. Is it hard to hear? A little bit, so the closer to the microphone is probably better. All right. Because there are lots of gems here, and you don't want to miss any of them. Trust me. This is really going to be fascinating. Okay? Good.
All right, excellent. So,
hi, Christina.
Hi, Matthew.
This seems awkward. Okay? I feel like we should be walking, but I'll just sit back and relax.
Okay, here we go. All right, so kind of tell everyone, you were the CEO of Ulthera, which had an incredible 600 million plus exit. But let's take it back a little bit. What were your early entrepreneurial tendencies when you were like just a little boy? What was that like?
So I grew up in northeastern Ohio, and my first real job where I was paid by someone else was on a muck farm. You have to be careful how you say that, especially in mixed company. But does anybody know what a muck farm is? Okay, first gem then. So muck is rich, loamy, black soil in which just about anything can grow. And so they grow onions and radishes and mustard and lots of things. And young children back then were hired at 25 cents an hour to crawl through the muck. And you were either planting or you were weeding or you were harvesting. And so my brother and I would jump into the back of an El Camino, Chevrolet El Camino, with about 8 other kids our same age, and we'd spend 6 or 7 hours on the muck farm. And 6 or 7 hours was $1.75 or $1.50, right? But it was good money at the time. I graduated then to a paper route. You know, there used to be a time in this country where papers were actually delivered to your driveway or your door. They weren't on. There was no online, and so that was actually like running your own business. In that, you know, you had a route, and you had to go collect the money, and you had to pay the newspaper so much, and you got to keep everything else. And it was really fun counting the money every week after collecting. So those were kind of early entrepreneurial experiences, I guess.
Very cool. So in order to get to be the CEO of an incredible company like Ulthera, what were some of the background ways that you got there? So you had to build up your knowledge in the medical space, and you spent some time at Johnson & Johnson, and then also at Baxter in Florida. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's kind of correct, but maybe I should mention one other job that was very meaningful to me. So in Ohio, there was a major manufacturer of baby bottles in our city. We were near Akron, Ohio. Akron was where all the tire and rubber companies were, and some of the offshoots produced balloons and other rubber-based products. Well, the Even Flow Baby Bottle Company, does anybody know that name, Even Flow? Yeah, they had one of their major plants in our town. And I worked at that plant for 2 summers, and my official title was I was a nipple tester. I'm not necessarily proud of it, but I can truly say that's the one job I've had in my career that truly sucked.
He's got jokes, but I'm
Okay. Hey, man, this is the A material right here. Come on. Okay. Yeah, so I wanted to relay that. I went to Kent State University, which was 6 miles away. I lived at home for the 4 years I went to Kent. My mother worked in the registrar's office at Kent, so living at home, I could go there. First quarter tuition with an employee discount was $92. Very similar to today's tuition at ASU, right? Very similar. So it was a real bargain to get a college education at very reasonable prices. I'm now on the College of Business Administration Advisory Board, and we're building a new College of Business building, and I'm helping raise funds for that. So it feels good to be able to start giving back to that. But I graduated with a marketing degree and went to work out of school for Johnson & Johnson and spent 3 years there, and then migrated to Baxter International, Baxter Healthcare, out of Chicago, but I've moved 10 times over the years and spent 23 years at Baxter, 2 Fortune 500 companies. So I certainly don't have the profile of a typical entrepreneur. So I came to early stage relatively late in my career.
I think there's definitely something to working for a giant Fortune 500 company in that you're learning all of these different skills. You're kind of observing how an organization works firsthand. You can see the problems internally where you would say, maybe I would do something different. And then when you go and become the leader of a company, you're able to then go and act on those things that you've learned. You kind of build this muscle memory almost, which I think is very helpful. So what are maybe some of the skills that you took away from Baxter? Because you had, you went into a startup after Baxter that wasn't exactly the best ride ever, but
What do you mean?
Well, you're about to tell us. But what are those main muscle memory skills that you took with you to that startup?
Yeah, so Baxter is a global company. It's evolved a lot. I left in 2001, but I was in blood collection and transfusion medicine, dialysis, immunotherapy, hemophilia, a number of major therapeutic areas. And Baxter had a tagline that we produce critical therapies for life-threatening conditions. And it may have sounded like, oh yeah, that's just another corporate saying, but it meant something if you were there. I mean, staying there 23 years, obviously, I believed that. And I believe that the patients who were fortunate enough to have our therapies versus others, were better off than those patients who didn't. So I like that purpose. I think the other thing that Baxter stood for and promoted internally was the 3 R's, and those were the values. It was respect for the individual, responsiveness to customers, and results for shareholders. And so, unfortunately, when you're there for a while, and again, I got so fed up with it, I only stayed 23 years. So it takes me a while sometimes to reach some conclusions, but ultimately became more results. And the respect and the responsiveness was kind of shoved aside. And at that time, it became more of a financial institution than what I would call a true healthcare company, with the patient and the customer at the focus of the company. So what I took from there after all those years was, gee, if I get into an early stage company myself, I want to do it the right way. And we all have our own view of what the right way is. And I think being true to yourself and doing it the way, if you're leading a company, doing it a way that's authentic for you is really critical. So I did leave Baxter for a very well-funded startup that was located in South Florida.
Okay, excellent. And so then, and that company is that also in the medical range? Okay. And so as we were talking like a week ago, you were telling me that was probably it was a very difficult company to run and to kind of see how there's a lot of turbulence there. So what was kind of like the most painful part about, what shocked you going from Fortune 500 company to small startup? What was like the most shocking thing for you?
The most shocking thing. So that's a really good question. We have a section later where I'm supposed to answer 21 questions really quickly, right?
Yes,
and I can't even
lost that paper somewhere. So,
but there were so many shocking things at this startup. It's hard to figure out just one. So maybe let me give you a couple.
Okay.
Yeah. So first of all, I was not the CEO of that company, so that's my disclaimer. The CEO was actually a physician, and I know a lot of great physicians, and most of them are really great doctors, and a few of them are really great business people. The person who was CEO of that company was a really great physician. How's that? Is that diplomatic?
Yeah.
So you started working with Ulthera after I left. Yeah, good. Are they treating you okay? Okay. Okay, well, I have nothing to do with it now, so, okay. Um, yes, so the CEO was on an emotional roller coaster, and there's probably a clinical term that one might use for it, but, I'm not a doctor, okay? And so one never knew what to expect when you came to work each day. But it was a pretty interesting concept in that he was a great salesperson. He had raised $180 million of venture capital, 40 million from Texas Pacific Group, companies like Procter & Gamble, Motorola, 3M, Medtronic, Quest Diagnostics had all invested significant amounts in this company, and those investments were around one or multiple of the 14 technologies that this company, GMP companies, had licensed in across drugs, diagnostics, and devices. So the concept was you're going to have 14 different chances to hit a home run, and probably more if you chose those technologies correctly, with a core group of about 75 people who were trying to develop these technologies into therapies that could be marketed. Our goal was really never to market them directly ourselves, but to find the right corporate partners to take them to market, people who already had that channel relationship. And so in 5 years, we spent $180 million. The CEO was gone after about 3 years. A Goldman Sachs banker came in to replace the CEO. And so in summary, I like to say I learned everything not to do in a startup. We felt from the top that each of the 14 licensing agreements were almost like, some of you have children, you always want to treat your children equally, right? So you have 2 children, you want to give them both equal opportunities. 5 children, equal. Well, he felt he had 14 children, these technologies, and they all deserved, equal performance. And the whole concept of portfolio management, where 2 or 3 of these were really promising, and so the bulk of resources should be focused there versus the others, was a concept that would just not be embraced. So that was a huge learning. Prioritize things and make sure that every dollar is important, and so making sure that you're spending your resources on the most critical thing that's in front of you at any point in time is really important.
So what do you think, and you don't have to say very specifically, but what do you think was the biggest bleeder of cash in that company? Like, what caused someone to bleed through that much money that quickly?
So it would depend on the day of the week. So there were days of the week when we were in a cash crunch, and so everybody needed to preserve resources. And so it got to the point where the CEO was convinced that the reason our cash balances were going down is that there were probably certain employees who were absconding with properties from the company, like copy paper. Okay? I mean, that adds up over time. We've all been through it, right? So the answer to that is for the CEO to be by the primary exit door and to ask to look into valises, briefcases, large purses, to make sure, and just do it from time to time when people least suspect it, right? He never found any copy paper, but so...
He sure built trust with the company, though.
Yeah, it was wonderful. And at the same time, a week later, 5 members of the management team need to fly from Chicago to New York. Now, there's a flight, Jim, every half hour from Chicago to New York, one of the airports in New York. And so he decided, well, since 5 of us are flying, it doesn't make sense for all of us to just go on United or American. We need a private jet for that. So 30 grand was spent on a private jet to fly from Chicago to New York.
Not as much as copy paper, though, right?
No, no.
That's a lot of copy paper. We all took copy paper with us, so it was crazy. It was really crazy environment. Okay.
So all this is happening. You were there for 5 years?
Yes.
Yes.
And we move on.
Okay. All right. So what kind of caused the shift here? Did the company then like shut down? What was like the most painful part about shutting down that company?
Yeah, so I was like the executive vice president of operations was the title. And about a year and a half into it, I do well when I focus, right? And not so well when there are 14 technologies to try to match them. If I'm going to get involved, I want to know everything about technology. And so I moved into GMP wireless medicine, which involved licensing agreement with Motorola for the transmission of patient vital signs in a wireless two-way path. They had the IP and we had licensed that. And we developed a licensing system which basically untethered patients from bedside monitors in critical care units or emergency rooms, and patients could ambulate but remain fully monitored. A radio on the patient, a 12 lead EKG set on the patient, you're transmitting with Bluetooth class 2 up to 100 feet away to another radio that stays with the bedside monitor. Brilliant technology, we developed it, we got it FDA approved, and I became president of GMP Wireless Medicine. And we got it out into the marketplace into 100 hospitals, and that's the only business from the 14 that's still alive today. So the second CEO who came in, Shelley Hartman from Goldman Sachs, she and I raised the round of financing just for GMP Wireless Medicine, and then she shut everything else down. And she and her husband and a few other investors stayed there. That was the time I left, 5 years into it. So there was no need, we were redundant at that point. And then I moved up to Arizona 4 months later with the Ulthera opportunity.
All right. So how did that come about?
It was an old J&J contact who had moved into private equity with a private equity firm out of London called 3i. They had about $100 billion of assets under management. And at that time, in the mid-2000s, they were investing in early-stage medical device and medical technology companies and had about 13 investments in the Western, well, in the entire U.S. And the person who was the managing director was a former colleague of J&J. And he said, hey, there's this promising company that looks great in Mesa. They're looking for a CEO, and why don't you look into it? It seems to be right up your alley. So,
Very cool. So coming to Ulthera, what made you excited about being the CEO of Ulthera? I think you definitely had a past in medical, which is really interesting because you said you graduated in marketing and then you kind of did this big pivot, and that's kind of where your career just ultimately crescendoed to, was in medical field. So you're building up your knowledge, and then you get this opportunity for Ulthera. What was particularly exciting for you about that company? Like being at the top, you have to really believe in it. You have to, your leadership spreads down through the ranks, and it's really just, if you don't believe in it, then you can't get anyone else to either. So what gave you that spark?
yeah, and maybe it goes back. So at Baxter, I actually had some fairly broad responsibilities. So for 3 years, we were in Munich, Germany, and I was vice president of marketing for Baxter Biotech Europe. We launched the first recombinant factor VIII product for the treatment of hemophilia, and then came back to the U.S. as president of Biotech North America. We had $800 million in revenue. So really had some substantial responsibilities. We moved over to the dialysis business in the U.S. my last 3 years there. But I left because first of all, you get a call from a recruiter, and you have I always wanted to be early stage at some point in my career. And you have a company that has garnered $180 million of capital. You think that that's a relatively low-risk startup environment. And as I looked at, there were 10 people who reported to the CEO of Baxter, and I reported to one of those 10. And as I looked around at the table, I really only had confidence in one of And at that point, it's really time to get out and move on, because it really is all about the people you're working with, both above you, alongside you, and in the whole corporation. So that's what got me to this. The Ulthera opportunity, first of all, I needed a job, okay? I had 2 kids in college, and I didn't have much of a network when you're with one company for 23 years. It just doesn't occur to you to build a network and to really work at that. And so I know all of you are building your network and continuing to add to it, and I commend you for it. It's really, really important. You never know when it's going to come in handy. I know Zach Harris is not here tonight, but I've gotten to know Zach over the last year or so. Unbelievable. He doesn't know everything yet, but I'm convinced that he will. Before long, he will, and we will know him. So I think it's a great example. He connects people so well. And the old GHA contact came to a point. But when I looked at Ulthera, and we had a founder who was sometimes challenging to work with, but they had a highly differentiated technology. And they had a technology that actually worked and could bring significant value in the marketplace. We're so very attracted to that.
So what did you do, because there's a couple interesting things out there just from that piece alone, that you were not the founder of the company, you came in as a CEO, there was a CEO that was in place before you, it was not a CEO, okay, but the founder was not CEO material either way, and so coming in, you had to form relationships with the founding team and the existing employees. How do you think, what did you do that made an impact on that relationship?
Yeah, so it was pretty straightforward, because the founder, and I affectionately call him a mad Russian scientist, and that's actually an accurate description. He's a brilliant scientist, grew up in Moscow, and is a physicist, and an absolute expert in the field of focused ultrasound. So both the imaging ultrasound and also focused ultrasound is thermal energy that can be controlled very precisely to ablate tissue wherever you want to go. He said, if you can show it to me, and he said, I can write Michael Slayton, I can write my name in focused ultrasound, and I'm very proud of his skills. But I was the second employee, so I really didn't have to build relationships with other employees, but I did have to build a trusting relationship with Michael. And over time, we worked through our challenges, but it was that much.
So in some of our conversations, you talked about the operating principles. I've always heard them called values. You brought up the values that were at Baxter, and then you started, was it 7 operating principles?
Started with 5.
5.
We got to 7.
Can you kind of walk through how did you pick out those particular operating principles, and then how did you get the rest of the team enrolled in those?
Yeah, so thank you, Christina, because these are pretty close to, I think, any company that you're starting or contemplating. I think culture, we hear about it all the time now. It used to be seen as winning culture, and you go to work and you like it, damn it. Right? And we're paying you to do what we tell you to do. And yes, you get 2 weeks vacation and no dogs in the office, right? Well, there's lots of different cultures that can work, but I think if you're starting something, you really need to be thoughtful, and I call it intentional, about what environment do you want to establish. And so, again, from all the years at Baxter, and then a failed startup, this was a chance with a blank slate, and to do it in a way that made sense to me. So what drove me nuts at Baxter, every couple of years there would be a new flavor of the day, and there would be wallet cards, and it would have a cute saying on it, and sometimes you'd be quizzed on the saying. Those were operating principles or values, or your mission, or whatever. And unless it's really feel it from inside, who cares, right? And so really wanted to do it the right way. And to me, values is a little bit highfalutin, if you will. And operating principles, it it says that this is the way we operate. So we're going to have a company here, and these 5 things are going to be important. 1, customer focus. Okay, so I don't think, we don't generate revenue with our customers, right? Makes sense. Background sales and marketing to start with, love revenue. And so if the whole company, not just the field people, are focused on doing what's best for customers, you can't go too far wrong, right? Unless your product just fails, or it's the wrong technology, or your pricing is screwed up. But if you're listening to your customers, you should be able to make changes. So let's focus on those. Let's just not talk about it. Let's actually act that way. So half the people out there, over time, we're generating revenue and talking to customers day in and day out. The other half, we're supporting them. And I love that mission. In fact, in the early days, it was a much higher ratio of people out there with customers generating revenue compared to the people supporting them. And then as the revenue grew, and clinical development programs grew, and product development grew, we kind of caught up with that because we needed to get the next generation. So that's one principle. These all start with C. Words are crazy. Second, consistency. And that was probably a knee-jerk reaction because of the inconsistency I saw at the previous start. But let's have an operating environment where you know what to count on. When you come to work every day, it's not a new set of priorities. These are our priorities for the year, for the quarter, and we're sticking with those. And if we change those, it's a big deal. And we're going to bring everybody together, and we're not going to just send a memo out. We're going to talk about why we're changing it and why it's important, and have a discussion about it. Does anybody have any issues with that? Well, let's talk about it. Leads to the third principle, which is constructive confrontation. Everybody in the organization should be prepared to constructively confront anyone else. And the CEO of the company better be open to that if they're going to say that's one of the values. So when somebody questions you in a town hall meeting and says, I don't understand this policy in HR or this policy or what we're doing with our pricing program, say, great, what don't you understand about it? Is it wrong? Is it a misunderstanding? Or do you have a better idea? If you have a better idea, let's have it. You know, you're trying to hire the best and the brightest people you can. Set up an environment where their opinions count. And it doesn't mean you do everything that everybody wants to do, but their voice is heard. That's all I ever wanted at Baxter, just hear me out. And if we decide to go in a different direction, that was fine. I'm not going to make all the decisions. And the last thing a CEO wants to do in any organization is make all the decisions. You become a tiebreaker from time to time, and that's great. And you know that's your, you have the privilege of doing that. But hopefully you're surrounding yourself with really talented people who have a lot better ideas than you, and you can work on that. So that's constructive confrontation. Fourth, cost effectiveness. So every full-time employee out there had ownership in the company. And the reason for that wasn't because we wanted to give away our equity. It was because we wanted everybody to think as an owner. So, right, Stacey? So if you're going to spend money, or you wanted a new ERP system, or a new CRM, or a new marketing program, is it really the best value for the company? And if it was your company, would you spend that money? Did you get another competitive quote on that? Because it is your company. You're an owner in the company. Think like that, act like that, and every dollar is important. And it really is going to start with the fire. And finally, the fifth was compliance. And it goes without saying, but you should say it. You need to say it. Anybody who operates in a non-compliant fashion is no longer an employee. There's no room for error. So there are mistakes that can be made. Don't make non-compliant mistakes. FDA, SEC, IRS, you name all the regulatory bodies, we will operate in a compliant fashion. I knew that the principles were catching on when we started to grow the team, the business was thriving, and the team said, I think, in general, I think we need another C. And I thought, really? And I was thrilled, really. You realize there were 5, and we need 1 more to make it 6? Well, maybe 2 more.
And that's operating principles in action right there. People see that they're
In technology, but we weren't really evolving it very effectively, so we needed to continue to build on its capabilities and continue to add capabilities to it as we have this growing installed base of systems around the world. And the last one was collaboration. So as you grow from 15 employees when we got our first revenue, to 220 employees at the end, it becomes easy for functions not to talk to one another. And so having collaboration as a 7C reminded us that we need to be communicative. Who else needs to be part of this decision? Whether it's manufacturing or marketing, whoever it was. We also talked about the principles before hiring someone. We let them know, hey, this is what you can expect. If you're going to work here, this is the environment you're entering. Are you comfortable with that? Do you have issues with that? Because if it's not going to work for you, then that's fine. We should just go our separate ways. And every employee had that discussion with their supervisor at least twice a year. Examples of how they were operating under these principles. And so that was the way we reinforced it. But it was never written on the wall anywhere. There were no wall of cards. It was the way we built the business.
Awesome. So now fast forwarding through, what were the decisions that you had to make when you realized, okay, now it's time maybe to seek a sale of this company?
Yeah, so we had really great growth. Okay, so we had a long battle with the FDA. I think the FDA is a friendlier environment now than it was in 2007, 8, and 9 before we finally got our clearance in September of 2009. So we actually got a certificate of European compliance on our technology and launched in Europe in the fourth quarter of 2008. Sold our first 10 systems and 36 disposables and generated $500,000 in revenue. And it was the first revenue of the company. Health Canada approval in May of 2009 and then FDA in September of 2009. So we got $5 million in revenue in 2009. And then once FDA came in 2010 with $18 million in revenue, 41 million, 59 million, 82 million. And then we finished 2014 at 118 million in revenue. So it was a tremendous growth curve, so much so that we were profitable slightly in 2011, and in 2012 again, and then very profitable in 2013, and decided we were ready for an IPO. So we filed to go public, very expensive process. We spent $5 million between KPMG and Ernst & Young in just getting everything ready to go public. So you have to be very committed to it. And we filed under the Jobs Act, which kept all of the data confidential for 90 days. And then we had an SEC reviewer that, we had a second version of it, a third version of it, and in the fourth version, all of our data became public information. And at that point, there were 3 companies that expressed interest in acquiring us, and so there was a bit of an auction going on. And when it got to $600 million, we looked around the table, and the management team, frankly, was a little tired at that point. And we decided that that was probably a pretty good deal. Yeah. And then, of course, we had a big, very audacious goal in the early days. And we had 2 actually, but one was to achieve $1 billion of value, from this enterprise. And so we shared that with our board of directors and our investors. And of course, one of our investors on the board, after we signed the deal for $600 million, said, "I thought you were going to be worth $1 billion." So don't get me started on venture capital. That's another evening.
That's amazing. That's a terrific story. So along the IPO is an interesting path to be on. What was the most difficult part about preparing your company to IPO?
Yeah, I think it's a distraction. So when you're private, you're focused just on your business. Obviously you have a board that's monitoring what you're doing, but you're just building a business, and it's great. And a very high percentage of your company has got to prepare. It's not just the finance team. It's other parts as well. So staying focused on the business and preparing for an IPO is difficult.
And how long were you working on that process?
We were working on it for about 5 months before we filed, which was late January of 14.
Very cool. Well, hopefully there's some companies that are on that road here in Arizona, and we can see all that. But so what made you decide to go with the company you went to instead of sell to a company from Germany?
Their bid was highest. Well, that's the short answer. They also committed to continue. This was their first medical device. It was a small pharmaceutical company. They're actually an interesting company. They developed years ago what has evolved into the #1 treatment for Alzheimer's. So in the U.S., it's marketed as an Amenda, the drug. You can see it advertised, and a lot of folks take it. You know, it helps delay the onset, but only for a period of time. But they had decided they really weren't large enough to develop additional pharmaceutical products, and they were already in aesthetics. They compete with Allergan on Botox-like product and dermal fillers. They wanted to get into medical devices as well. So, very good people. I don't think they necessarily made all the right decisions as far as how the business should develop following their acquisition of us. You know, they never happened quite correct.
You had to let that go, essentially, to this company that had been so close to your heart. And so you stayed on as CEO for 2 years. But you kind of, like, what was that? Is that weird for you?
It seems like it was a lot longer than that. Actually, are you sure it was only 2 years? Yeah, so I do have some lessons learned, right? So when I'm the head of another really successful startup company at some point, in another lifetime maybe, and somebody buys us for a good price, I won't stay longer than 3 months. Okay? And so I suggest to you that once the sale's done, get the hell out. Okay? Because, it takes time. You build it a certain way, and the acquired company is never going to do it the way it should be done. Again, it's my perspective. But you hear story after story after story where it's just not the same. So there needs to be a transition period, but make it as short as possible, and make sure you take care of your people as best you can. So Stacy and I stayed for 2 more years, right? And a number of other senior managers had that 2-year period. We were gone. We did come to work that last day, but we left early.
All right, well, thank you so much. I'm going to start our 21 questions now, and I'll try to be as rapid fire as I can. And then after that, there'll be some time for Q&A. So start thinking about what you want to ask.
You may talk a lot faster than I can really listen.
Okay. We'll see. Right. Cats or dogs?
We have a cat at home.
Okay. Do you cat?
Well, I grew up with dogs, so my wife's a cat person, so I really don't have a preference. I like animals.
Okay. All right. Switch your topics. Excellent. Favorite app?
Words with friends. Anybody else? I mean, 7 other words. Don't you think you use all 7? It's brilliant.
That's great. Your favorite operating system?
Operating principle?
Operating system. Like Apple, or
Thank you.
yeah.
PC.
All right.
Old school.
Your favorite holiday?
Thanksgiving.
Favorite car?
65 Dodge Mount, the first car I had. I don't have it today. I drove it so long that one morning in New Jersey, my first job with J&J, I went out of my hotel room. I was there for 6 months. It was so full that this car, I knew it was on its last legs, but I went out of the parking lot. It was actually laying on its side. And so I called an officer in the line, came and shot it, and they took it away. I still remember that day. Yesterday.
Favorite vacation spot?
Hawaii.
Okay. We were just talking about this earlier. You're a big into reading.
Are we under attack?
No.
Who's got the tear gas?
Missed it. What is your favorite book?
Favorite book? Recently?
Sure. I was told that you have like a book club going on.
Well, not a club. I read everything I can about leadership. There's not one that really stands out, but Jim and I were talking about Patrick Lencioni, kind of devour everything that he writes. Big fan of science, why is just fantastic. Raj Sisodia, he wrote, Conscious Capitalism, and it's all about purpose. So I read a lot about purpose, and I think he does a great job of, so we think, we're looking for a greater purpose as they navigate through this adventure called life. But, you got people, older, me, and many others who are in their later stages of life looking for just as much purpose, so they maybe want one more job or one more experience, and they want it to be meaningful. So I think it's something that is, I don't think there's an age for it. I think people look for purpose. And I think what Raj Sisodia did in his book is really discuss the sociological origins of that, going back 2,000 years ago, and why people seek purpose as they move through their lives. So it's a little heavy, but it's great that it's not just a nice concept. There are actually scientific reasons why we've evolved as human beings. Maybe more than you wanted to know. That was a quick answer.
Love it. I love it. What's your favorite movie or TV show?
I just watched another version, On Golden Pond movie. My kids were nuts because every year we'd all go to, we'd go on a ski trip together with friends of ours, and I'd always tell them, I'm going to the video store, because the video stores aren't that nuts. And I'm going to rent On Golden Pond. No, Dad, don't do it, not again! But from a family standpoint, we love Tom. That's a classic, right? So you're telling me I got a chance?
Okay. What is your favorite musical artist? What? Who is?
What are you doing with your life?
Yeah, so I like Flo Rida.
What's your favorite karaoke song?
Under the boardwalk, out of the sun, under the boardwalk, and there's a fun under the boardwalk.
This is great. I didn't realize there were so many talents over here. Is there anything you collect? Anything you collect?
Habits? No. I do collect things. I collect pens, stamps, coins,
Collecting boardsies now too?
and a couple.
Yep. All right. And then any unusual skills or talents?
Sorry. Okay, so I actually, my hands actually are a musical instrument. So more of a percussion instrument, but I've been known, I can actually, I'm a manist, okay, so I can play tunes with my hands. So if you hold the microphone.
Oh, snap.
just a taste of it, but if I go out to have, let's say, Mexican food, I can often play a duet with myself. That's really good.
What's your top strength in business?
I think perspective.
What was your first job?
Yeah, I was not
Okay.
I was in love those days. I came back and tear comes to my eye, crawling through the mud.
What profession other than your own would you attempt?
I made NBA superstar. Yes.
You got the height for it and everything.
Thank you. LeBron and I are very close. We both grew up in the Akron area. We may be related, I don't know. His vertical's a little better than mine, at least at this stage of the game.
What's the best compliment someone can give you?
I don't accept compliments very well, so I'd rather not.
Okay. What's a cause you're passionate about?
I guess I don't answer.
Okay.
That I listen and that I'm fair. So to me, it's all about treating people the right way and treating people the way you want to be treated. And also valuing every perspective, but then make a decision to get on with life. You know.
Alright, so what's a cause you're passionate about?
Lots of different causes. The country's in a bit of a mess, and I think it's maybe a bit different than it's been in the past, but I just hope we can all get along, and try to move to the middle, not necessarily politically, but just listening to one another, and not being so isolated with our, pejorative views.
Okay. Who are 5 people that you want to have dinner with?
Winston Churchill, he was born on my birthday. Oprah, because she's so rich. Warren Buffett, the same reason I think he's fascinating guy. Bernie, yeah.
You say
Fergie? Black Eyed Peas, and I'm still sad that she left him. Anybody else for the same one?
Yeah.
And then maybe D. Wade, because we were living in Miami when the Heat won their first championship, and he averaged 39 points in the finals. And Shaq was along for the ride, but it was all D. Wade at that point.
And then what's one thing on your bucket list?
I haven't made a bucket list yet. So am I supposed to do that? Okay. So my goal is actually just to use the various experiences that I've gained over a lot of years to help early stage companies or other companies reach their potential. Help them avoid the mistakes that I've seen made and that I've made myself. So.
Sharing that you were my next recurring guest, I had lots of people share with me how helpful you've been to them. So thank you for your support in the community. So now it's time for some Q&A. So please have some questions.
Yes.
Sorry, 1 second. Sorry. Did you end up staying in Arizona after your big success? And if so, why and how did we connect with you?
Yes, so after 10 moves, over 37 years of marriage, and we sold the company, Nancy said, so Matt, are you going to do something else? And I said, yeah, I'm not sure. And she said, well, if you're going to do something else and it's not here, you're still welcome home on weekends. We're staying here. It was just a topic. And so, easy to get a hold of. So
How do you feel about the talent pool from Arizona, and how do you feel about a company trying to do rapid growth in Arizona as far as the
Yeah, it was never an issue for Ulthera, and again, we started to grow as we were coming out of a recession, so maybe it was easier then, but we found that if we needed specific skill sets that work here, no problem relocating people to Arizona. So a lot of good homegrown talent, HU, U of A, Flagstaff, I mean, all great schools to get employees from, and a lot of people willing to come here as well. So it was never an issue.
Hi. You've alluded to the challenges of working with regulators in healthcare, which is, a big barrier for anybody who's trying to innovate. Can you talk more about the challenges, going from unproven technology to actually selling the product, from, all the challenges, including funding and, keeping the company going for these years?
Yeah, so the challenges of taking something commercial and start generating revenue. Yeah, and so the founder had already raised the Series A financing when I joined the company. It was $5.5 million. And so I joined in July of '06. And by late '06, it was clear we needed another round of financing. His company was doing all the R&D for us, and it was very, very expensive. And so it took a year to raise that next round of financing, which was a Series B. So we raised $24.5 million in that round. And as we got to the end of that process, it wasn't clear we were going to be able to maintain our payroll. So very tough times. Same thing when we raised our Series C, although we were in a little better shape financially then. So I think it's a bit of a balancing act, because as a CEO, you have to be out front and center. They're investing in you as much as they're investing in the company and the technology. And at the same time, you've got to have a strong team executing day in and day out, or nothing else matters. So trying to manage all of that is a real challenge. The technology itself is really cool, really differentiated. And as we got it out into the marketplace and understood more about it, we got it out before it was really ready. But if you have new things, and there won't be, on the healthcare side, you can't get something out that might hurt a patient. But if it doesn't work right, and there's no patient safety involved, get it out there anyway. You learn so much faster when the product is actually out in the hands of users. And then you respond to that, and you improve it, and you change this part, and you improve the software, the operating system for that. And that was a really great decision that we did. And then also we figured, differentiation. What can be different? Not just the technology, but what about your marketing approach? So we offered, before anybody else in the industry did, a full 5-year warranty on our system. That was after we had 1 year of experience in the field. We had a pretty good idea of what the rate of repair would be. And so, can you imagine with a brand new technology, a company nobody ever heard of, with a full 5-year warranty, the perceived risk of adopting a brand new technology from there down to there? You're going to stand by this for the next 5 years? Meanwhile, other equipment companies were charging $10,000 a year for warranties. We didn't need to. We were charging a lot of them to buy the system in the first place. And we knew what our repair costs were going to be. And we ended up with almost 90% gross margin as a result of doing that. We then invested in an ongoing program to perform clinical trials that further validated that this technology was really effective in a number of different ways. So there was actually, in the aesthetics marketplace, there was actually science behind the technology. And that was pretty rare as well. Another area of differentiation. And we just had a great team as well. So our service to the customer, better than anybody else, the customer focus as a first-time principle really paid off. But there were a number of nervous times along the way. I hope Yes, so if I were a freshman of the issue, your parents are right there. So I would say don't worry too much about a GPA. I would say take the toughest courses you can and things that you're really interested in and learn as much as you can without worrying so much about what that end result is, letters or numbers or whatever it is. So I wish I would have taken more. I was worried about GPA. Why? You know, the real employer really says, gee, you only have 3.2 instead of 3.8. You know, maybe something, but it's not important. What's important is what you learn. So, also, folks getting out of school or early in their career, I really think going to a large company, as Christina said, is not a bad idea. Those companies became large for a reason, so they must be doing something right. And so don't spend too long, 23 years, you know, it's a little long, but be there long enough to appreciate how they got to where they were. What were their values? What were their operating systems? How did they do that? Processes that they utilize. And then figure out what resonates with you on that one. Another thing is, whatever you're doing, no matter how well paid a position might be, the minute you stop learning, move on. Find something else to do. So, really believe that life is all about lifelong learning. And if you stop learning and you get in a rut somewhere intellectually, then you got to get out. You have to accept this. So, for what that's worth. You got a lot more. You know, my kids don't want to hear that anymore.
So when you started to really grow, you started hiring a lot of people. What's some of the advice that you give from an HR perspective, and then the backing up with the execution operation to scale massive people coming onto your company?
Take your time. Do it fast and take your time. So, you know, so the trajectory of any organization really has nothing to do with what they're doing. It has to do with who's doing it. And so if you shortcut the hiring process and you have the wrong team or the wrong person, it takes a long time to recover from those errors. So make sure it's as thorough as possible in the front end. Have a process. Follow the process. Get multiple input from your team. Make sure that you're benefiting from the expertise of the group rather than what one person thinks. And we didn't have an annual sales meeting. We had an annual business conference because it was all functions and it was all our people anywhere in the world. And so Terry Barnhill, who was our 5th employee and who managed trade shows, marketing communications, and ultimately became kind of the office manager. She was the soul of Ulthera. She said she and her husband Barry had been to one of his conferences and they saw this great speaker. His name was Roy Spence. And Roy Spence has co-written a book with a woman, and it's all about purpose, corporate purpose. And his whole point is that it's not what you sell as a company, it's what you stand for. It's your purpose, it's the why. So same thing. She said, he's a great speaker. You know, he's from Austin, Texas, and he's a little guy, he's got a deep Texas drawl, you know, and he gets in front of the group and he kind of bullshit into it, you know. So said, I think he'd be great for the business. So, okay, let me talk to him. So I talked to him a few times. He found out all about it. And sure enough, he shows up. And gets up. And it's a big meeting. Where were we there? I don't know, the hotel, because we were finally afforded 100 people. So it was great. We were growing up here before you had 50 people. It wasn't quite as nice a place. And Roy spends the first half hour showing himself with every president since Jimmy Carter. I mean, you know, Bushes and Clintons and, you know, you name it. And so he was the founder of an advertising firm. You know, Austin did really well. They had Southwest Airlines, they had FedEx, they had US Naval Academy, a number of Walmart. So a number of big clients. And he recently retired from that, now he's on a speaking circuit and he's writing books. And so Roy comes up and he said, what I do now is all about purpose, and I do think that corporations that establish a purpose will do better than others. But you got to understand that this Ulthera, I've been looking into that, and our first indication of the FDA was for a non-invasive brow lift. And our second indication was for a non-invasive face and neck lift. And then we got a couple of other indications. And he said, I've been thinking a lot about Ulthera and what the right purpose for Ulthera is. And then he went into kind of, I've never been to a spiritual revival, like intense reading, but sure enough, Roy was fire and brimstone. He's standing in front of the room and he said, I've been thinking a lot about Ulthera, and I submit to you that Ulthera is more than a brow lift. It's more than a lower face and neck lift. Ulthera's about lifting lives! And we all stood up and said, yes! And the next morning, we got up and we were sobering up also, and it was so evening, and we looked at each other. Is that what we're about? Is that our purpose? And we thought about it and massaged it. And look, that was not a quick decision for us, but over the next couple of months, we said, yes, that is our purpose. What is right? And so we thought about it, and we said, well, why should I look at it? So we're providing this cool technology to practices, right? And they're paying us a lot of money for it. But they're making a lot of money. They're charging these patients $3,000 for a whole therapy procedure. And lots of patients, consumers, think it's worth it. And in fact, they tell us all the time, I got it. It works. It works almost every time. And I feel better about myself. My self-esteem is improved. I guess we're living their lives, right? And what about the practices? They're making a lot of profit. They're hiring people. They're broadening their services. We're living the lives of the people in those practices. What about our employees? We're from the second employee to 220 employees. They're putting their kids through college. I guess we're living the lives of all therapists. And so it became a rally, from January of 2013. And then we started thinking about how else we could put programs. And so Stacey really spearheaded the work that we did with Sequoia students in charter school. We used a population of poverty below. Half the students are deaf. And it just had lots of issues. And so our lab Ulthera is where it was. So we developed a relationship with them. We felt like we were trying to look at the lives of people as well. That's part of our profile. So it took off right now. So the point is that I think it took us a while to get to a real purpose and moral purpose to do that. But I think if you're starting something, you can be thinking about that a lot earlier. Because people really do want to work at a place that has a broader purpose than just building a top line and building a product. It's supposed to be